All right, guys, welcome back. I hope you had a quick break. I know some people are still grabbing some coffee and they're going to come in. There was a line in the bathroom. So I know it's difficult to even get back here any sooner, but I just want to try to keep us kind of on time so we can get as much in as we possibly can. Before I forget, there are some index cards on your table. So anytime throughout the day, throughout this panel, or for any future panels, if you want to write down your questions for this panel or for any future panel, you can write it down on your index card and then just hold the card up and one of our volunteers will come around and get it. And if you write down the name of the panel that your question is for, that would be helpful. So if it's for this one, they'll make sure the moderator gets it for this one. You can ask a question on there. For a future one, just write the name of the panel at the top of your card. Okay, so that's that. We're now going to jump into our next panel around the topic of evolving the I in D&I. So, reimagining inclusion. The panelists will question whether the time has come for new approaches to traditional diversity and inclusion corporate programs. They will share some new approaches and innovations that are emerging as workforces become more multicultural and D&I is more connected to business outcomes. And this panel will be led by our moderator, who I had the pleasure of meeting today, May Snowden. She's president and CEO of Snowden and Associates. And May is joined on stage by a group of very distinguished leaders who are already up here and ready. She is going to introduce you to them momentarily. Please welcome May to the stage.
Thank you so much. I don't see John here, but thank you, John, for inviting me to participate in this. Maria, you have been outstanding in helping us get organized. I appreciate that. Scott Wong, wherever Scott is, he does everything in order to make this thing go well. So thank you very much. I am very, very enthused about this particular panel. We are going to really get into the buzz at the bottom. So we've been talking about the tone at the top and the mood at the middle and the buzz, and now we're going to get into the buzz at the bottom and build it up and go through it. Now, my plan is to leave 10 minutes for Q&A, so we want you to participate. But we have a full panel here, some outstanding people. Now, you will be able to see their bios on page 15 and 16, so I'm not going to read them to you. So I'd like for you to see those there. I am pleased to come after hearing about the new Majority Alliance and the new business model and the mission of that group, because it's all going to contribute. It's all going to be a way of collaborating with the full journey, because someone indicated that this is a journey, it's not a destination. So, you know, we're not going to be able to say, okay, now tomorrow we'll be there. There is no there. We keep evolving. People become more aware. And so we will see how that happens with this discussion with the ERGs, BRGs, and they come in many, many names, okay? Now, is there anyone here from Xerox? Xerox was the first company that established what we called an employee resource group, ERG. There are many, many names for them. But Joseph Wilson was the CEO at Xerox. In the 1960s, there was a violent racial riot that went on in the Rochester, New York area. And he responded to that. Now, this is a CEO responding. He got his black employees together, and they organized the very first black employee caucus. It was in response to a national riot that was going on, and it was huge in the Rochester, New York area. So from there, in 1964, we have had an evolution, a journey of different employee resource groups coming into being. So the way they had been evolving was based on identity, ethnic identity, racial identity, gender identity, disability, identify with a disability, and now they're evolving into others, multidimensional. They're really focused now on being a part of the business. They're very focused in a global perspective. And so we will be seeing how the companies that are represented here are utilizing their employees in building their inclusive environment. Now, when Xerox started it, they had an objective of addressing issues of discrimination and creating a fair corporate environment. So now we're looking at how do we create an inclusive environment, collaboration, inclusion of everyone. All right? So thank you very much. This is going to be outstanding. First, I'd like to understand who's in the audience. So would you please raise your hand if your organization has or supports employee resource groups, whether you call them that or affinity groups or networks or whatever. 1, 2, okay, quite a few on this side. Oh, quite a few in the back. Very good, very good. If you are a member of an employee resource group, raise your hand. You are a member. Okay, very good, panelists. We've got some folks out there. Okay, if you have a leadership role in an employee resource group, raise your hand. Okay, leadership roles. Leadership, oh, look, this full, almost the whole table. Leadership roles, okay. If you are an executive sponsor of an employee resource group, raise your hand. Executive sponsor. 1, 2, okay, all right, so we have 3. Okay, very good. Thank you so much. It's so important to know who's in the audience. So let me just introduce you. As I indicated, bios, page 15, 16. We have Deborah, DeHaas. I'm going to call her Deb. We have Pamela. I'm going to call Pamela Pam. Puryear, Fran, Dillard, Fernando, Serpa, and Yvette, Donado. All right, so thank you very much. And I would like to just begin with Deb. And I'm going to take my seat here in just a minute. Deb, I tell you, in July 2017, Deloitte came out with an article, and it was entitled, Deloitte Thinks Diversity Groups Are Passé, and it was by Jeff Green. And I just want to thank Deloitte for putting that article out because it caused so much thought in corporations about our ERGs and what are we going to do and how do we create more creativity and more energy and innovation and value from the possibilities of the ERGs within our organizations. So Deb, would you talk a little bit about that article, since you lead D&I, for Deloitte, did you think that your networks were passé?
So thank you, May, and thank you for putting up with me on another panel here this morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. So maybe just to clarify, the article that May's referring to was an article in Bloomberg based on an interview with Deloitte. And I know we have some media folks in the audience. You know, sometimes in the media, pieces are there that are the way you would like them to be presented, and some pieces are not. So certainly the certainly the Bloomberg article did create a lot of buzz, not only at the bottom, but in all parts of our organization and many other organizations. And actually, it's been very exciting for the last 6+ months because it's created a great opportunity for dialogue both inside our organization and outside our organization. So let me just try to put a little bit of perspective around where we're headed at Deloitte with what we've called over the years our business resource groups, which I'll just make this very clear, they are not going away. But it's so much of what we're doing now is about the and we are really evolving, and one of the things we're focused on is what we're calling inclusion councils, in addition to our BRGs. So as you've heard, we've been on this journey around diversity and inclusion for 25 years, and it started with a problem we had really around women in our organization in the early 90s. At that point, we were largely an audit and tax firm. We were hiring 50% women, even at that time, and we were losing women in significantly larger numbers than men. We had a big turnover gap, a 7 to 10 percentage point turnover gap. So that initiated the start of our women's initiative, which evolved into a diversity initiative in addition to our women's initiative. And we've had a very strong emphasis on this for 25 years. What we found over that 25-year period is kind of three constants. One has been the tone at the top has been critical, and as you heard earlier, our CEO today, Kathy Engelbert, is amazing in her commitment to this, but we've had that commitment through multiple CEOs. We elect a new CEO every 4 years, and we've had multiple CEOs who have been committed to this. Second has been a business imperative, and the business imperative 25 years ago is our business model didn't work when you're losing 50% of your workforce in a significantly larger number. We've actually completely eliminated that turnover gap. Actually, men turn over just a little bit more than women today, but that was a business imperative at the time, and the business imperative today is that we're an organization that's all around talent. If we're going to attract the best and the brightest people, we have to be an organization that they aspire to be at, where they feel, we like to say, where they can connect, belong, and grow. And so it's a business imperative for us to attract the right talent, and frankly, our clients expect us to bring diverse talent to help them solve really complicated issues. And the third piece is that we have found that if we didn't continue to evolve, to change how we thought about diversity and now inclusion as well, our efforts started to stagnate. We're an accounting firm. We measure everything, right? And we could clearly see that every 3 to 5 years, if we didn't continue to evolve, things were not moving forward. So the way we think about our inclusion councils is an evolution of our BRGs. One element about our workforce that may be different than some of you is we have a relatively more diverse generational mix inside our organization. Over 60% of our workforce are millennials, and Gen Zs are starting into the workforce soon, and within a decade, I'm a baby boomer, we will largely have no more baby boomers in our organization. So we have a very different generational mix than many of our clients. And as we asked our people about our business resource groups, because we really wanted the B to be important. What was the business reason? How could they really help our business be more successful? Many of our people, particularly some of our millennials, told us we don't want to be defined by being identified with a particular attribute or cohort. What we are interested in is the and. The opportunity to potentially to come together in a particular cohort or community, but also the opportunity to connect with other cohorts. So they wanted what we call bonding capital, within a group, but they also wanted bridging capital to connect to other parts of the organization. So we've been experimenting for about the last 12 to 18 months with what we call inclusion councils. We're having them be driven very much locally. And what we found is that, in some of our geographies, we are very diverse. We've had all of our BRGs in place in markets like Chicago, where I live, or in DC, but we have some other markets that perhaps are not as diverse. Maybe you go to Omaha, Nebraska, and it's not as diverse as some other of our markets. And these inclusion councils have included representation from all of the BRGs along with others, and we've really given them a lot of leeway to plan a set of programming that's going to link back to our business strategies and also around those tenets of connect, belong, and grow. And they've been really successful, so successful that, with the feedback from our people, that we're now in process of rolling them out to our broader market. And I suspect we will continue to tweak and evolve them as we get feedback to make them even more effective. But I do want to reemphasize that where our BRGs still find it meaningful and important to come together, we support that. In fact, later this week we have our Hispanic Latino Summit going on at our Deloitte University, where we will have a large cohort of those colleagues coming together to focus on some issues that they feel are relevant to their continued growth and development at our firm. So it's really about the and I know we're going to get into this conversation of inclusion, but we really do think the inclusion element is a critical piece. So we still have issues around diversity that we are laser focused on, and we're not walking away from those, but it really is about the and one of the things I like to say is, and I passionately believe this, is that inclusion truly unleashes the power of diversity. And if you have a diverse organization but you don't have inclusion, you really will not get that full power of diversity. So we are very focused on the importance of inclusion. We've done a lot of research, and we think these inclusion councils are an important part of that.
Very good, very good. And is my mic on? Okay. So when we talk about inclusion, we're talking about a culture of inclusion, which is really critical to understand when you think about an organizational culture. And I'd like to just ask Pam, since she has a focus on talent development and culture. So the culture is what we're talking about. So Pam, could you just talk about what that inclusive culture looks like from Pfizer's perspective?
Sure, thank you very much. And I want to also thank everyone for participating in this and for inviting us to be part of this panel. So happy to be here representing Pfizer, and also want to recognize Michael Koo, who leads our Global Asian Alliance, who's one of the people that raised his hand and said, I'm in a leadership position at our, we call them colleague resource groups, CRGs. And one of the things that's so fascinating for me sitting here as a chief talent officer with responsibility for diversity and inclusion as part of a broader portfolio of work is that I think about D&I a lot. And I think about it in the context of talent development, culture, employee engagement, leadership development. I have someone on my team who focuses exclusively on diversity and inclusion, but I have a broader view of it. And what I really like about the way we're thinking about it at Pfizer is that it is integrated into the rest of our talent agenda. So on my team, we have one person dedicated to D&I and culture, which are really the platform functions that cut across everything else. So we're not talking about succession planning without talking about how do those leaders create a climate of inclusion and how do they create or support diversity in their organizations. We're not talking about leadership without talking about what does it mean to lead in a diverse and global organization. So from my perspective, it's really about integrating diversity and inclusion into the overall talent agenda, because for me, that's how it really sticks in the organization and it really gets traction, and you're able to have it not be something like sitting on the shelf over on the side that people think about only when the D&I officer comes into the room. So one of the things that we focused on at Pfizer in the last year or so, and it falls under our culture umbrella, but it's really about leadership. It's what kind of leaders are we developing, what kind of leaders are we hiring, what kind of leaders are we advancing in the organization, and what does good leadership at Pfizer look like? And how do those leaders drive our culture, including our culture of inclusion? One of the things that I've heard this morning, the word a few times is the word courage and courageous. Someone said that we all know the business case for diversity, and the fact is the business case for diversity has been around for quite some time. It may be getting stronger with the new majority, but it has been around for quite some time. What I'm encouraged by in terms of how we're talking about this at Pfizer is that you really don't change behaviors just with a business case. You change behaviors with a business case, which we call head leadership, but you also change it by engaging people and motivating people and inspiring people and connecting people to what's important, which we call heart leadership. And you also make change, you drive change by being courageous, which we call guts leadership. So as we've looked at diversity and inclusion at Pfizer under this broader umbrella of leadership and culture, it's been all about how do we create leaders, develop leaders, engage leaders and colleagues in having head, heart, and guts around diversity and inclusion, knowing the business case, engaging people around the importance of it, and finally, and maybe most importantly, having the courage and the guts to actually do something different.
Excellent, excellent. Yvette, Yvette represents the only nonprofit organization on our panel, so I'm so excited about having her here, and especially the Educational Testing Service. You remember those SAT tests that you had to take? That's Yvette. So Yvette, would you talk about your role in overseeing human resources learning, D&I, and how you're bringing all this together in a culture that relates to your diversity strategy?
First of all, thank you for having me. I think this is a wonderful collection of folks that really care about a very important subject. So we've been in the business of education for 70 years, and we think that D&I has to, as folks have said already, be integrated in everything that we do. So when we're doing succession planning, professional development, talent recruitment, how we attract the employee opinion survey, there isn't anything really that we're doing for our staff that shouldn't have a dimension of D&I, because that's the only way you make it part of the way we work around here. And we've managed to do that, but although we've been around for 70 years and our mission is to advance equity and education for learners all over the world, we also do a lot of self-examination around what does it feel like to be here. And we've learned lots of things. I'm sure we're going to talk about that later. But the whole point is to make sure that everything you do has D&I as a dimension. We don't like to call it an initiative because it sounds, as folks have said, as something apart and distinct, but it really needs to be central. So when we're getting advisory committees together, when we're bringing in folks to look at our test items to see if they're fair and equal, we make sure we have teachers from every part of the country, different disciplines, different cohorts, et cetera. So it's about thinking about equity in everything that you do. Your research, your citations have to include citations of people of color, because otherwise, if they're not included, if they're not reflected in what we're doing, then we don't care about inclusion. So those are the ways that we've done that.
Thank you very much. I did some research on ERGs, just looking at their journey over time, and the 4 or 5 things that are really moving ERGs forward is being global, being focused on the business, being a place for leaders, so it's a designation place for leaders to come, to assess ERGs. You know, if you're not measuring something, you're not going to get what you think you may want to get. So you got to assess and measure. And the last piece is on multidimensional. So I want to kind of bring out from our panelists what they're doing in those areas. And so I'm going to ask Fran. She leads D&I for Texas Instruments. I'd like to ask you how you are looking at including different groups. So this would be a multidimensional, multicultural, multigenerational ERG, but with a little twist to it.
Thank you, May, and I'm also excited to be here this morning. At Texas Instruments, we believe inclusion creates space for everyone. And so as I think about your question, May, I specifically want to talk about our faith-based initiatives. What's the 2 things you learned in life? You don't talk about politics or religion. So about 17 years ago, Texas Instruments launched faith-based initiatives. We started with our Christian initiative. That walk was a challenging one. As you can imagine, there was a lot of pushback around starting a faith-based initiative. There were a lot of questions. There were a lot of concerns about who would be excluded. There were a lot of concerns around perspectives and how would you make that fit. And one of the things that we made sure that we did in making that determination that we would allow that to move forward was to make sure that the faith-based initiatives fit within the policies that all of our initiatives were required to be responsible for, as well as align with the values of our company. So we actually made a decision to do that. It went all the way up to our CEO. And today we have 3 faith-based initiatives. We have a Christian faith-based initiative, we have a Muslim faith-based initiative, and we have a Jewish faith-based initiative. And I wanted to share some statistics with you in terms of why would a company do that? Why would you step into that difficult situation? And this really kind of gives some context around it. More than half, about 55% of Americans say they pray every day. 45% say they rely on a lot of prayer and personal religious reflection when making major life decisions, like, do I accept that promotion? Do I move to a country I've never lived in? In 2014, the Pew Research poll said 31% of parents say the most important things to teach children is religious faith. Religious faith was the 3rd most important trait behind responsibility and hard work, according to parents. So as we think about attracting talent, retaining talent at our company, we've been bold around this space. They hold interfaith religious ceremonies at our company. They visit different places of worship. And we've done several surveys where our employees said they made a decision to come and work for our company because we have an open environment and a culture that supports their faith. We do not require or support any evangelizing in our workplace. However, we do encourage and support the freedom of religious expression as long as they respect other differences within our corporation. If you think about it right now, Texas Instruments has 15 employee resource groups in a B2B environment, a place where we don't have to do that. But our company represents the world. We have people from we have 30,000 employees at Texas Instruments. They come from around the world. We're in 35 different countries. And so we are very open and flexible in that space as long as it lines up with our core values.
Can I just follow up on one quick thing that was said? Because I love the fact that you, almost made a joke about you don't talk about politics and religion, right? But that's exactly where the world is changing. And this is where, as organizations, we have to respect the fact that you cannot walk through a day at work without having something come up about politics today. It's just a reality of recognizing what's going on in the world around us. And so I think I applaud you for making that move on the religious organizations, but I think we have to recognize as leaders that this is part of how we have to operate. We have to be prepared to have those, what may be difficult conversations for us with people who have different views and different perspectives, because that's just how the world is evolving. And so we started something this year, really, it happened, it wasn't in response to all of the things going on in the external environment, but it happened to coincide. We started something called inclusion commitment sessions, where we would just bring 25 leaders at a time, invite them to lunch. They come when you serve them good food. And they didn't even really know why they were coming. We got a lot of calls about, well, what do I need to prepare? And is there a pre-read? And is there a deck? And how should I, all of thinking it's a typical business meeting. And really, it was a 2-hour lunch to talk about inclusion. And what are you seeing as a leader? What do we need to respond to? What are you uncomfortable with? What kind of support and development do you need? Because we all have to be equipped now as leaders and managers and colleagues to have conversations about things like politics and religion, because they're just part of what's going on in the world today. It's part of the evolution.
That is just excellent. Just the dialogue, the opportunity for conversation and to get people to feel comfortable talking about things that may be uncomfortable, but that's the only way you grow, is to be uncomfortable. So that's great. That is great. Fernando. Fernando represents the Association of ERGs and Councils, so he knows about everything that's going on in ERGs and councils. And so I wanted him to speak about what is the most interesting ERG trend for 2018?
Wow, thank you. No, easy question. Just for those of you who do not know about the Association of ERGs and Councils, we are a membership organization focused solely on ERGs and councils, with over 200 member organizations from all industries, sectors, plus educational institutions, government agencies, nonprofits. So I see and I work with many, many, many different ERGs and councils, and the trend that I really am seeing is cross-ERG collaboration. I think in the past, ERGs were very siloed. They would just focus, for the most part, focus on their members' needs or maybe their constituent groups, and that was it. But recently, there's been a huge move to collaborate with other ERGs, and I think that goes with the whole theme of inclusion. And we have seen, because we also do an honors award where we recognize the top ERGs and councils in the country. And the top ERGs that I've been seeing over the years have been collaborating. And I have a great example. PNC Financial is one of our great company that does a lot of great things in diversity. Their women's group, their women's ERG, saw a need to, or saw a great opportunity to sell financial products to women. But not just women, but women of color, women veterans, women in the LGBT community, women with disabilities. So they partnered and collaborated with the ERGs of all these other groups to put together a strategy to outreach and tap into those specific communities. And within a year, I have to use my cheat sheet here for these numbers, it's amazing what they did. They held 82 events. They were able to open over 450 consumer accounts, brought in $826,000 in loans, $600,000 in investment products, with a total revenue stream of $1.2 million.
Whoa.
To help their bottom line. And that's just, an ERG. So, and I'm seeing this time and time again, just the cross-collaboration and also tied to the business, as we talked about.
Yeah,
and Fernando, maybe just playing off that, because that's really our inclusion councils are an extension, really, of that cross collaboration. And I think a couple of the things that we've seen that's really made us very excited is, one, we've seen overall participation dramatically increase across the nature of the events that we've had and the things that they're doing together. And the other thing that's been really gratifying is that I think perhaps, at least in our organization, by having the BRGs not as actively perhaps cultivating allies, we didn't leverage that cohort in the broadest sense as well as we could. And so the inclusion councils have enhanced overall participation, but have brought a more diverse set of individuals into the collaboration, and it's been extremely powerful. And I think it's created greater cultural awareness of some of the individual cohorts as they do things as well.
Right.
And I would just add that we do that at Texas Instruments as well. I mentioned earlier our religious and faith-based initiatives. We have one luncheon that the LGBTQ group does with our Muslim initiative quarterly. And so that's been very successful in terms of breaking down those barriers. And you wouldn't traditionally think about it in that way. Secondly, we started a series called TI Talks, where we bring in thought leaders from across the United States to talk about topics that TIers care about. And our council of all of our diversity initiatives are involved in those efforts. So I agree, collaboration has been a key in terms of our transition from being more siloed about 3 years ago to being much more collaborative this year.
that's great. Those of you who are members of ERGs, raise your hand if you're collaborating with other ERGs within your organization. Okay, that's really good. So raise your hand if you're not collaborating. Maybe that's what she was about. Okay, you haven't got there yet. Well, don't be afraid. So because there's a lot that haven't got there yet. So thank you very much. So commerce, you heard the commerce piece. The ERGs are bringing in money. You really get a great tone at the top when you create value for the leaders. They're creating value for the leaders. Tone at the top is wonderful. So that is a huge piece of what's going on now with ERGs. I'd like to hear from Yvette on her communities of practice, because that's a term that I hadn't heard before. Remember, I said there are many, many terms for ERGs and councils and networks and business resources and da-da-da-da. She has communities of practice. Would you talk a little bit about that?
So interestingly, since our mission is to advance education for all, and we are diverse, we're 60% female and a third diverse, we were actually concerned about creating ERGs because we didn't know, well, will that ultimately be divisive? Will we end up all going to our corners and not cross-pollinating in a way that could bring us together? And so we decided to create communities of practice so that people that were interested in similar things could talk about those things. So for example, if you're interested in artificial intelligence, if you're interested in dual language learners, if you're interested in, we are like a university attached to an LL Bean, if you can think about that. And so our folks are fascinating in the range of things that can interest them. If those who are administrators, and the challenges that they have their group, but it includes everybody of every cohort who is doing a particular job. This may sound bizarre, but if you're interested in project management, since everything we do ends up being a project, there's a community of practice for project management. So anybody in the organization can go learn about it. So for us, it was about curiosity and education. Are you curious about something that I'm curious about? And who knows more about that? And then the way that we support them is to bring external experts and professionals that can better inform their conversation. We provide facilitators, the room, and whatever else we can do. So that was our way of doing it, but it was an extension of our commitment to education.
Okay, thank you. Now, Pfizer is a global organization, and I would like to know what you're doing to get your ERGs involved throughout your organization globally.
Absolutely, I can respond to that. And I just want to quickly respond to
go ahead.
something that was just shared, because this is an interesting question to me about, when I think about where Pfizer started, we started with affinity groups, right? They were grassroots, people of like interests came together. It was generally around gender and race, and that was really where things started. And then over time, we did develop into 7 groups, or colleague resource groups. And now I see this trend sort of back toward, it's not about race or gender, it's about other things that we have in common. And being inclusive of people with different perspectives and different backgrounds, and it doesn't have to have anything to do with race or gender, which I think is a positive trend. And so it's back to the "and" that Deb mentioned. And I don't want us to lose sight of the need to really focus on this new majority, right? So it's an interesting sort of question that I think we're going to be debating at Pfizer. How do we have interest groups, single mothers and people who like artificial intelligence? All of these things are wonderful groups that you want to be a part of if you have common interests and like interests. And at the same time, we don't want to forget about the diversity of D&I. We do still have a diversity agenda. So it's not just about inclusion, it is also about diversity. So I just wanted to make that point, because I think that's kind of where we are in the evolution. We're almost going back to this notion of affinity groups, which is terrific, but let's not forget about the D of D&I. We still need to focus on diversity and inclusion.
We need both.
We need both. I even see it at Pfizer, as we move to talking more about inclusion, a little bit we lose the focus on diversity. So I don't want to forget that. I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. I think you have to make sure that, in particular, your people don't feel that you're moving away from the D.
Exactly.
And
And from a
this
business
dialogue-
perspective, for all the points that were made on the panel this morning, there's a business reason why we need to continue focusing on the D and having people that understand the Latino market and the Asian market and the African American market. That's very important for us at Pfizer in terms of our medicines. We have certain disease states that are more prevalent in the Latino community or more prevalent in the African American community or the Asian community. So we need people that understand that and can bring us and connect with, be the bridge to the communities that are going to allow us to get our medicines to the people that are going to most benefit from them. Very quickly on the global piece, we are a global company, and I would say the thing that's helped us the most is technology. The fact that we now can leverage technology to engage people from other parts of the world, so everything isn't so US-centric and so New York-centric, has been really important. When we've also have leaders now that are leading from other parts of the globe. So we have a very active colleague who's leading diversity efforts based in the UK for all of Europe, and they just had their own diversity and inclusion summit just for the region, not the one that we do out of New York globally, but for the colleagues in Europe. So we are seeing much more interest in engaging people outside of New York and outside of the US. I think Deb she mentioned to me in a conversation we had this morning, some of it is very local because people have different needs in different markets. So we want to maintain some connection, some global connection, and help support the organizations globally, and also allow people regionally and in individual countries focus on the things that are important to them.
May, can I? Yeah. So before I wore the hat of association ERGs, I was head of diversity for a number of global organizations, and the global part was always the most intriguing part, because we did inclusion training and development in Shanghai and South Africa and Saudi Arabia, around the world, and it does have to be local. You have to focus on what the needs are at that local level. You cannot say, because we are US-centric, this is how you're going to do it, but you have to really understand the culture first before you can do anything, and then they can really move the needle. A quick example from one of our association members, Coca-Cola had a women's North Africa network, and they saw a need that there were certain jobs that were male-dominated. One of them was security guards. And they said, this is an opportunity for us to really move the needle. So they partnered, again, allies, with certain members within the organization to put together a special training for women to go who are interested in going into the security services. So they went through this training, and within, I think, a year, they went from 0 women security guards in the Coca-Cola facilities to over, I believe, 20 in Egypt. We're talking about Egypt right now. Yeah. So this was amazing move, culture change at that time. And that's the power that these ERGs can have.
Yeah. And I would just add for TI, we're heavily invested in Asia, as well as Europe, but Asia is our prominent place where we've invested. And our women's initiative are pretty much in every one of our sites. And we've been able to leverage those initiatives in a number of ways. For example, in Germany, the Women's Initiative is just not about women. They've got 58 different ethnicities at one site in Germany. So they've served as a pivotal force to help bring those communities together and make a stronger and support a stronger culture at our Germany site.
Women's initiatives normally attract leaders. So when you look at the ERGs in companies that are focused on women, they are normally led by senior leaders, women who are senior leaders. In the other organizations, based on my research, they're not. They're individual contributors or directors that lead the ERGs. So I'd like to ask the panel, what is happening to cause the ERGs to be a designation place for leaders so that we have more senior leaders that are either on the succession lists that are coming into your ERGs as leaders? Anyone can pop in and have that dialogue.
So from a leadership stretch perspective, each one of our ERGs has a chair and a co-chair. They also have an executive sponsor. So for example, the Muslim Initiative, our sponsor for the Muslim Initiative is our CFO. If you think about our Chinese initiative, I have several of my members of the initiatives and former chairs here with me today. Please raise your hand in the back. Just wanted to make sure I acknowledge them. Is one of our executive officers who runs our power business. It's a multi-billion-dollar power business. We have chairs in those roles. Those chairs have to be vetted, selected, approved by their manager. The great opportunity for these chairs is they get a chance to work with an officer. That officer has one-on-one time with them. They coach them. They have a chance to present in broader formats. They have a chance to go through development that my team provides for them. So in terms of the partnership and alignment with HR, the business, and selecting the right people for these roles, they are positioned very prominently for next level roles within our organization.
I would say we have something similar. The structure is slightly different. We have what we call the Diversity Worldwide Leadership Council, DWLC, which is made up of ELT members, executive leadership team members, so direct reports to the CEO, are actively engaged in our diversity and inclusion work as members of that DWLC. Each of them is an executive sponsor to one of our 7, what we call PCCs, Pfizer Colleague Councils. That's a lot of acronyms at Pfizer. Yeah. So for example, Michael is the lead for the PCC, the Global Asian Alliance, and he partners with one of our ELT members who's his executive sponsor. And we come together quarterly to meet. So it is the one-on-one coaching and relationship building that you get to do, but it's also being part of the strategic group that comes together quarterly to look at what is our D&I strategy and how do our CRGs fit into that overall D&I strategy at Pfizer. And so for us, we have a very wonderful woman who runs our Global Women's Council, but all of our PCCs are led by senior leaders because it is an opportunity for them to participate in developing the strategy for D&I.
And I think probably should take a step back because we should ask, why are the leaders not attracted to become members? And a lot of that is the optics of the group itself, the brand within the organization. And I tell groups that they need to be relevant to the organization. They cannot just do, as we call it, food, flag, and fun. Right. Just march in parades, have Heritage Month events. I ask groups, do you want to be known as, the group that throws the Cinco de Mayo party? Yeah. Or do you want to be recognized within your organization as an ERG that is leading, business results, delivering business results to the organization? And if you're going to do that, you need to first align yourself with the business goals. You can't be off to the side doing your own thing. You have to talk with your executive sponsor, with your senior executives, find out what's keeping them up at night. Find out what business challenges they have and align your goals for your ERG or your council with that. And if you can do that, then you can get that credibility, that visibility that those groups need to start attracting those senior leaders.
Excellent, excellent.
I just wanted to add one other thing about Fernando. So Fernando's organization hosts an awards process where they assess over 1,300 companies, is that correct? Yeah. For their ability to really execute well in this space. And we were honored to place number 5 this year for the work we're doing at Texas Instruments. But it's not just about the ability to be honored. It's about the process that we go through to really understand, are we making the impact we want to make? So they look at the organizational impact. They look at our management and executive involvement. They look at our communication strategy. And they give us a score and feedback. And one of the things that we do is go back and try to make sure that we're doing things that make our organization even stronger. Yeah. So thank you, Fernando, for that.
Thank you.
Fantastic. I have 3 questions here, and if there's other questions, we'll take hands. Fernando, this is for you. Okay. Top 3 best practices for different ERGs across any company. Top 3 best practices.
Wow, okay, not on the spot at all. Best practices. I would say management commitment. Make sure that you are talking to your senior leaders. Like I just said, find out what's on their mind, what's keeping them up at night. Align your goals and your activities with that. Find out what the situation is, put together a strategy, and execute on that. Measure. I think what Fran said. We need to make sure you have quantitative metrics around everything you do. Do not just say we held a lunch and learn and 90% of the people said it was a good speaker. Instead, ask the question, did I learn, or I learned a skill or knowledge that I can take back with me and apply to my job? That's a huge difference right there. That way you can show you're adding value, you're contributing to the business by increasing value, skills and knowledge.
Excellent. In many companies, ERG or BRG leaders are volunteer roles in addition to their demanding day jobs. Isn't that true? Okay, how do your organizations recognize the leadership roles of their ERG leaders and empower them to greater impact with an alignment with the senior leadership team? It's a big question.
I mean, I'll just take that really briefly. I mean, similar to what others talked about, I mean, all the inclusion-related roles inside our organization are a part of the succession process that we go through. So they are very much vetted. They are viewed as a leadership opportunity, and then that is part of what's built into their goals, and they are given time to execute against those, and they're evaluated on the success of the goals that are set. I mentioned our CEO putting me on her executive leadership team. That's something we've also done with our inclusion leaders in each of our businesses. We've recommended, and our CEOs have put them at their leadership tables as well, and that's been a very effective part of it as well. The other thing we're doing more broadly, I talked about this importance of inclusive behaviors and impacting day to day, and I really do believe that is critical to how it feels day to day. I think the ERGs are a really important part, but it gets down to how does your supervisor treat you day to day, and what's my experience working on that client team. And so, again, early days, but we've become much more intentional around what are the expectations, what are the behaviors we expect of inclusive leaders, and building those into our overall performance management process as well.
Thank you.
So we believe that business is a social institution. We're not as large as most of the companies represented here. We're about 3,500 human beings, but the way that we do it is we are very deliberate in saying community service is part of what you're supposed to be doing. So we give them time and we encourage them to use it, and we track it and we tell them we haven't hit our goal. We raise once a year, we raise $1 million for organizations that are doing good work with others, and it's mostly serving the needs of the underrepresented. And so we challenge at the officer level, we challenge each other around participation, around who gets involved in what activities. We honor them, and the liaisons that work on this are then invited to a lunch with our CEO. So we make it very clear that being successful includes being good citizens and caring about those that have less. And so that's how we do it, and we find it very stimulating. And people use it as a source of pride. Every year when we do it, there's this feeling of enormous community. And so that's a way that we come together across the organization.
Now, this question may have already been answered, but let me just put it out here again. There is increasing fluidity in the definition of race and gender. How does this, or will this, change your D&I practices, which are more traditionally defined?
So I'll just say it's a very timely question for us because we are actually changing a couple of leaders around D&I. So I mentioned I have someone on my team that leads D&I and culture. We had someone in place who got another terrific role within Pfizer, and we've just brought in a new D&I leader from the outside. So with him coming in, and we are also, I didn't mention, in our 5th year of having CRGs. So we started CRGs broadly in 2012, 2017 was year 5. So now that we're past year 5, a good time to take a look at our strategy to see what do we want to do differently. So the fact that we're in our 6th year, we have a new D&I leader coming in, and we also have a new leader coming in to head up our DWLC, who is one of our commercial leaders. He runs half of our business portfolio. So talk about tone from the top. He's coming in to lead our DWLC this year. With all of those things happening, we've decided to take a look at our strategy and what might we be doing differently. And I expect that this is going to be probably the #1 thing on our agenda, is how do we respond to the fact that we have such a multicultural world, such a multicultural workforce. No, I don't want to be asked to choose whether I'm African American or a woman. I'm both. So which group do I belong to? And do I dedicate time to both groups? And where should I spend most, I'm representative of many more people now in the workforce. So I don't have an answer to your question, but I would say that it is absolutely something that we'll be looking at, because I think this is the time for Pfizer, and it's also the time given where we are evolving as a group of human beings. I love that you refer to people as human beings.
Human beings.
Yes, we are human beings.
Human beings, that's right. Is there any other burning questions out there? Yes, to the right.
Hello, my name is Alice, and I'm from Washington, D.C., China office. So thank you for the wonderful discussion, and here I have the questions. I know we're now talking about inclusive and diversity, but I think we're still talking about Americans, since I believe many people in this room, they're from the U.S., they're born here, or like they are the new immigrants with green card. But I'm talking about the other group people. So I feel they are the minorities of the minorities. They are the very smart people who passed the GRE, the SAT, created by the ETS, and then they got an offer from the universities here. After graduation, they look for the equal work opportunities here in the US. But many chances are that when they go to the interview, the employees will feel that it's so complicated to sponsor your H-1 visa. So they would say they will prefer to hire the U.S. people. For those kind of people, I know all the speakers, like your companies, are encouraging the inclusive and diversity. But do you still create the environment for those group of people? I think they are very smart, but they also look for the equal opportunity here.
Anybody want to take on that?
That's a really good question. We have so much activity in that area that we have somebody dedicated just to helping to process all of the H1s. So we have a lot of wonderful inclusion around the very question that you ask, because the work we do is very technical, high measurement, psychometricians, statisticians. So we have people from China, Israel, someone who just came from British Columbia. So we actually have a lot of very good experience about inclusion in that area. And then another thing that we're looking at is how do we get them more involved in leadership? Because they do amazing work and they're technically so proficient. We have a lot of wonderful folks from South Asia, but we're not seeing more of them take on leadership roles. So we have to pay attention. We believe that we need to pay more attention to how do we get them interested in not just being fabulous in the thing they know so well because they have the ability and the content, but what would it look like if they also expanded their horizons and also became leaders? And so we don't want to make assumptions that, oh, well, they're happy doing that, we'll just leave that alone. And we're actually doing some good work in that area that I'm very proud of. But thank you for that question. It's a good one, especially now, given how welcome our president makes them feel.
Right. This is the last question. You want to stand up? This is our last question. Oh, boy, we got more hands up, but I've run out of time, so I'm going to just have to take one more question.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Hai-Ying Yao. I'm coming from Societe Generale, which is a French investment bank. And I'm very happy, very honored to be here today. It's really a great event so far. I learned a lot from this event as of now. So my question is, under the ERG in our company, we have a subcommittee called ACE, which is represent Asian Culture Exchange Committee. So we have a professional development committee under that, and mainly focus on mentoring and the body program. And this committee is under the ERG as well. And my question is, what is the best way to select the mentors? That's the first question. And second question is, once we have the mentors, what's the best way to help the mentor and the mentees to really get the most benefit from the relationship? Thank you.
Have a mentorship, sponsorship program going on?
So at Texas Instruments, we have a Women for Technical Leadership program. And one of the things that, one of the elements of that is a coach being assigned to each one of the participants. And what we do is align with making sure that those skill sets are very clear in terms of what we're looking for in terms of a coach. We do a coaching for technical leaders, so we spend time with a coach. It's a full day session with teaching them how to be a coach, what's important if you're going to be a coach for one of these participants. We also make sure that the clarity is there for the participant. For example, they are involved in helping to create their development plan in terms of what to expect for their full year of coaching. And at the end, we measure whether or not that was a great experience for the participant or not. But I think one of the things that's important is both the training piece of it, because anybody can raise their hand and say, I want to be a mentor. They don't always know what that means. They don't always know what that looks like. So really investing the time in terms of understanding what that commitment looks like. Secondly, we need to make sure that the mentors and the sponsors that we're choosing are truly committed to helping these individuals get better and be successful in the workplace. And if their role is to help that person achieve a next level leadership role, in our case, this is what we're looking for, there's some accountability that's wrapped around that as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, panelists. This was just outstanding. The panel members will be around for a little bit longer, so if you have some questions that you didn't get answered, you can ask us later as we engaged in the rest of the program here. I sincerely appreciate all the attendees. You were wonderful. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for your engagement. And we will be transitioning to our next topic, which is a briefing on political shifts, what the new majority needs to know, which is what we need to know. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, panel.